welcome everyone to Adopting Onboarding First Mindset. I'm Tomas Grubliauskas. I'm Engineering Manager at Business Central Client Team, and with me I have Cody.
Yeah, I'm Cody Hoover, a software engineer under Tomas on the client team.
Yeah, our team is responsible for developing Business Central mobile and web clients, and we also were contributing to onboarding effort. So, onboarding framework. It's one of the continuous investments we have been doing for at least last 2 years. We have been adding new capabilities release over release. We have done that because we truly believe that onboarding framework can help partners to transform their process and their business into scalable, fast growth mode. Because onboarding framework helps to take a very repetitive tasks and turn them into a really repeatable process that is codified and can be shipped with extension instead of being a loose process defined somewhere on paper, maybe at first. Yeah. And today, we're going to take a bit more developer-focused approach. We're going to take a look at AL code. We're going to also give a little bit of sneak peek and design thinking, what were the thoughts behind that code, and hopefully will inspire you to also come on board onboarding journey. So looking at the agenda, first we'll take a look a bit what is the onboarding first mindset. We're gonna take a look at some of the building blocks, how to build a good checklist, how to guide users through configuration or automate it at best, how to enrich onboarding experience with page links, videos, and also adding tours to pages so we can introduce pages to your users who have never seen that page before. And lastly, we'll also take a look how to leverage the help pane. But before we dive in, I just want to maybe show hands. How many of you looking at the agenda have seen or heard those topics? Could you give a show of hands? Okay, we have a couple. How many of you tried those concepts in AL? All right. We also have a few. And how many of you have onboarding pieces, at least pieces of onboarding framework running in production right now? Okay, we also have a couple. So hopefully our mission today is to inspire you to first get overview of what is possible, how to apply it, and use it in your production code. So onboarding mindset. First, onboarding mindset is to start early. Onboarding should not be an afterthought that you put once you finished writing code or in was already shipped in production. It should become part of your developer workflow and even further design and requirement analysis flow. You should take a look at your product and the functionality it provides and sit down and, or at least imagine a consultant role in your mind and see which steps of the onboarding are repetitive, very labor intensive, that means a lot of manual work, and can be easily transferred to code, or ideally automated. And taking these processes and then trying to codify them in AL code so they become repeatable and consistent as well, with consistent quality. And of course, as any good developer mindset, it should be iterative. So you implement, you see the results from live, getting feedback from consultants, you tweak the process, and you keep going until it's perfect. So today, we're gonna take a look at a simple extension we have built to show off some of these capabilities. We'll be stepping into shoes of an ISV developing a shoe management extension, and just to warn you, there'll be probably more shoe-related puns in the presentation. So I will be assuming a role of more of a, let's say, a product manager, someone dealing with business requirements, taking user's perspective, and not so much oriented into code. And Cody will be the opposite. He will be writing code and also guiding us through what is possible in onboarding framework and helping us to arrive at a great conclusion. So maybe let's take a look first. What do we have in our sample extension?
Yeah. Great. So first, let's go ahead and start with what are the basic building blocks of...
Just switch your screen.
Nope.
Try to duplicate it.
extended instead of duplicated. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and look at the base pages that we have in our application to know what sort of onboarding flow we might be working with. So it's a shoe management application where our main entry point is going to be a list of shoes that we have in our inventory. Currently, it's pretty empty. And then as we receive new shoes into our inventory, we expect they are going to be entered in. We can type in information about that shoe itself, but what's really important for people wanting to buy the shoes from us is if we have the right size. Right now, I can see, though, we don't have any size information.
Yeah. So looking at this extension, we could call it feature complete and just call it a day and ship it to app source. But of course, now we're a bit smarter. We are trying to adopt this onboarding first developer mindset. So we'll be taking steps and adding and enhancing this extension. And one of the first things we should think about is setup. Cody, what kind of setup do we need for this extension?
Well, right now I see that I have a size list. It's empty. If I wanted to add a size to it, at the moment I don't actually know what size I should be adding. Am I going to use a US size, a European size?
Yeah, that's going to be tough to settle on because I'm from EU, you're from US, so tough choice.
Yes, but I think what we can do is give the users of this extension the possibility to choose for themselves. We can use an assisted setup that'll guide them through that setup process and allow them to make the choice that's best for them.
That's great.
So let's leave the product now and go into code and see what we can do. So first, for an assisted setup, right, we're going to have the page itself. We won't go through the code for that. It's just a simple wizard that prompts the user with a choice. But once we have that page, that assisted setup wizard available, we need to expose that. So we can do that in the via code unit, where using an event subscriber to sign up for the onRegister assisted setup page, we can go ahead and call the guided experience.insert assisted setup function and point to our assisted setup page. The great thing about this guided experience insert assisted setup is that not only is it going to make this available as an assisted setup in the set of all setups available to users, it's also going to expose this further to the onboarding framework so we can put that in a checklist so users will know to go through this right away when they see the product. But for now, we've just added this to our library of possible items. To actually put that in the checklist so our user gets to it right away, we're going to do that as part of our app installation. So we've chosen to do that in the onInstall app per company trigger. The reason we're doing that is if we ever want to add new checklist items or update this after some users may have seen a checklist before, this will ensure that gets added. But there are a lot of different lifecycle events and triggers that may work better for your needs. So let's go ahead and see what we need to do to get that into the checklist. So here, we're actually re-inserting it, re-registering it as an assisted setup through the procedure from our other code unit. And then we just call checklist.insert. We just have to tell it that it is an assisted setup and tell it which assisted setup we're pointing to, and it will appear automatically. We can also choose what order we want this to be relative to other checklist items. We can limit what profiles this is relevant to. So we could say that it's relevant to all users regardless of their profile, which is what we've actually done here, or we could limit this just to some specific profiles. We also have the ability to choose whether all users should complete this as part of every user's onboarding process, or in the case of our this assisted setup, we only need to insert those sizes once, so that we can pass false. It is important to note that if you call either of these methods more than one time, the call that comes last is going to win. So if you, there we go. So if we were to, nope, okay, getting weird. So if we call insert assisted setup later with different text, that's going to overwrite what was called the first time. But since we're just calling the same procedure, we don't have to worry about that.
That was simple. What are other types of guided experience we could insert? Because this looks like a method that has more members.
Yeah. So right now we're just using it to register an assisted setup, but we could also go ahead and add some help links, videos, tours, and I'll talk a little bit more about each of those. So a help link or a learn link is just going to insert a URL that can be added to a checklist that will open to your own documentation site. It might link to a partner integration if you're integrating with some other services, if that's relevant to your setup. The same as before, you can call this insert learn link, and then if you did want that in your checklist, you would just have to say that it's of type learn and pass that same URL that you registered it with. Similarly, we can add a video to give users a video tour recorded for the product or any other video information you want. If we want to guide them through some great functionality that we add in our extension, we can start a tour directly from this checklist. That's going to take them to the page, give them some information about it, and guide them through the important fields, actions, etc. on their page. And for this, again, we're just going to call insert tour and pass the page that we want to lead to. Now, if we are perhaps extending some other page, so we're adding fields somewhere, but we want to make sure our users get a tour to that page. I mentioned before that if we were to call this and point to some other page that we don't own, but we might overwrite something that the original extension may have, or the original app may have defined. So instead of setting a tour on some page that we don't own, there's yet another one that we can use instead called insert application feature. Now, insert application feature does a very similar thing to tour or to the other ones, except instead of only pointing to a page, we can point to anything. So let's say that we've extended a shoe card from another app. We can actually insert an application feature using a code unit that's going to launch the shoe card. That means we can provide whatever extra information and context we want in that checklist experience without overriding what the original author has done. And again, the same, we just insert it as an application feature with that same information.
Amazing. That was a really nice summary of all the different guided experience items that can be put together. And it also displayed how we can combine both internal application features and external rich media like videos and links to create a really nice step-by-step onboarding experience. So maybe let's take a look how that looks in practice.
Absolutely. So if we go back to the extension that we've deployed that has our checklist, the first thing that our users are going to see when they open to get started is this welcoming banner. If they accept the prompt to get started, they are going to see this item to start setting up the shoe extension. So if they go ahead and start that, this starts that wizard that we added as our item earlier. We can choose the shoe sizes.
Let's go with European.
I guess. I don't know what size I am, but we'll make it work. We can then go ahead and just take a look at our shoe sizes list and see that those were already added. Users shouldn't need to go do that. And this is an example of teaching tips that we'll come back to later. But great, so our assisted setup worked. So we can go ahead and finish that. Now, we didn't intentionally add this here, but we can go ahead and see how we can add some additional checklist items even without doing it in code. So I can go to the checklist administration page. And here I can see all of the checklist items that are currently configured across the company. We can see that we have a lot of items for a bunch of different roles, and we can also see this setup shoe extension that we added. If we wanted, we can go create a new one. We can create a checklist item. So what we wanted was a tour, right? So we can click on this tour. From here, we can see all of the tasks that are registered as tours. So these are items where somebody said guided experience.insert tour. If we had chosen one of the other types, we would have got a different list. So here we want the tour. This is actually going to tell me that one already exists, because as we saw, there was a tour checklist item on the role center. That's going to make sure that we're aware that we're overriding something that somebody had already added. But like I said, there's a way we can get around that. We can go to the application feature instead. And from here, we can actually launch some other tour, some other setup page. But that's actually not what we want, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And just like that, that will no longer be on the page. So that's how we can, even without code, go manually configure checklist items.
This is really great, because what Cody just showed, there's two paths. You can, if you're building a bigger application that requires extensive setup, you can just programmatically create a checklist together with the guided experience items that you insert, and just ship that out of the box, and once the extension is installed, the checklist will be populated, and consultant can complete the final setup. Or there's other way, if your app is smaller, or not necessarily, you can insert the guided experience items as options to the guided experience administration page, but not directly insert to the checklist. So you leave it to maybe a VAR who is assembling different IP from different providers and building the final checklist, not programmatically, but just by manually assembling tasks. So this is really powerful because it allows to tailor the experience on based on what is required at the last mile. Yeah, so this is really neat. So we just kind of are done with the checklist, and we're now adding the tour to a page that is unfamiliar to the user, and consultant probably would like to show it and demo it in an expressive way. So the next thing, Cody, what do we have for that?
Yeah, so we can see that we've already added here. We want to start a tour, but what is that tour actually going to show the user, and how do we make that available to them? So we want to take them to the shoe card page. And if we look at this, all tours must start with some properties at the page level. So if I go and do these properties for the about title and the about text, these are the two properties that are required for making that appear.
Cody, what are those stars?
Yeah, this is something that's starting to pop up in some of the strings that we can add. We can use a bit of markdown syntax. So here we've used stars to bold the name of a page. Now, we have some guidance on when to use the syntax, such as bolding or italics or links. In this case, we're using bold because it is the name of a page. We want to emphasize the name of sort of a proper noun in the context of Business Central. We don't want to overuse this because we don't want our teaching tips to be very shouty and overwhelming to the user. But in this case, this is important enough that we think we want to add it. But in some places, we actually want to emphasize it even a little bit more. I think one of the most important fields on this page is the size field. So if I go down there, I might want to add a stop in the tour to that as well. And here, I can go even one step further. More than just bolding it, I can actually say that the size field should link to the shoe size list so that users not only know it's important, how to or what the source of that information is from, but they can actually go there directly from the tour in an interactive way. At the moment, these are limited only to internal Business Central links. You can only link to another Business Central page. You can't link out to some other external documentation, but there are some ways to do that through a different system that we'll come to later. It's also important to point out where these properties can be added, the about title and the about text. These can be added on any page object, they can be added on any page part, and they can be added on any field. They can also be added on any action at the root level of a page. At the moment, we don't support them on page part actions. Yeah, there's one other thing I want to point out because these two things are right next to each other. What is the difference between the tooltip and these about properties? Why would I want to use one over the other? Can I just make them the same? Tooltips are meant to be what this field is. They're relevant for every field in your application. It's very reasonable for every field to have a tooltip set. And that's going to be what appears only when the user manually hovers over the caption for that field. These about titles and about text, these are going to be describing why the user cares about that field. Why is it important to them? What can they do with it? And it needs to be important enough that it meets, that it's one of those top few fields that the user will want to go through a short tour to get to them. So they should not generally be the same thing.
Question?
Yep.
Can I use rich text in the tooltip?
You cannot use rich text in the tooltip. Right now, the main place it's supported is in the about text property, but who knows what the future holds. I will say one thing about the shoe size list. Since we are linking to it from a tour, we may want to go ahead and add a quick teaching tip to that page as well, so that when users are taken there, they will also have the context of why they were taken there. Otherwise, they may feel lost in that moment. So, but now that we've added that, let's jump in back to Business Central and see what that tour looks like. So we can see in the teaching tip, in the checklist, and this is actually a point where I can point something out really quick. There are multiple strings that you can define when you are inserting the guided experience item. You can insert a short title on the left, a longer title on the right. It looks like I may have mixed them up, as well as a description of them and a duration. All of that information is going to help users understand why this checklist is right for them, whether the amount of time is something they can do now or later. And so the better information you give, the more successful this tour is going to be for the user. And try to keep them from hitting skip for now on everyone. So let's go ahead and just start the tour. When we do that, we're taken directly to the page. We see the tour down here. And we can go ahead and take that. As we said, that's going to point to the field on the page. Now, if we had multiple tour steps on this, pointing to multiple fields, the order would be the order that users see the fields, not the order in which the teaching tips are defined. So what that also means is if I had an extension that had its own teaching tip, pointed to a field, and that was inserted above my field, it would get there first. Or if the user came and personalized and moved fields around, the teaching tips are going to go in a logical order and not be jumping left and right. That also means that the text you add in teaching tips shouldn't make assumptions about where it is on the page or what order tips are going to be revealed to users. So do keep that in mind. We can see here that if I click on the shoe size list, I'm going to jump directly to that page. We have that tour tip that was shown to us, but I actually don't want to take a tour on this right now. So I'll go back, and I'm right where I was left off. The tour is seamless, right where it was. One additional thing is, Microsoft also has some great information we want to share with our users, but we understand that if a developer has put a teaching tip in a place, they feel that's important, and we defer to that. But we do also make a few system UI elements available as optional tours at the end, so we can point to some information like the work date or this open a new window control. But when we're done with the tour, we just say got it.
Well, what if user wants to come back and revisit the tour?
Well, there's a couple of different ways to do it. The one we'll look at right now is simply hovering over an item in the top corner of the page, and that'll make that appear where they can retake it again. And as I said, there's another way that we can look at later. But I think we're done with this for now. When we leave this page and we go back, we can see that because the user completed the tour, the checklist item intelligently auto-completes, and the user knows that they're ready for business.
This is really great. I think teaching tips are a very expressive way of introducing a page, but as Cody mentioned, we probably should reserve them for the key fields that needs explaining and not just over-explain every page and keep that property precious. But it doesn't remove the need for having more traditional documentation as well, maybe linking to a help page or help Microsoft Docs, for example. We link to them extensively as well. So what, Cody, are options for using a more traditional style of helping the user?
Yeah, all of the traditional help that you may already be using in your extensions are still available. And in fact, recently we've made it even better and easier to use. So, especially for apps on AppSource, the entry point for all help is going to be the context-sensitive help URL that you set in your app.json file. This is the root that's going to serve as the base default help URL for all of your pages. So if no additional contextual help is provided, it will go to there. But then, if we go into our shoe card again, if we want to link to a very specific help page just for this, we have a couple different options. One is that we can define a relative link. This is going to be relative to that value set in app.json and applied to the context-sensitive help page property. And so it will just append those two together. Or like if your help service isn't set up that way, that relative links are appropriate, you can always use a more absolute path using the help link property, and that will just override that value from app.json for this particular page. You cannot have both properties at once. The compiler will complain, so it'll make sure that you aren't making any mistakes there. In our case, though, our help does work this way. We'll go ahead and use that. And now we can see what that looks like in the product. So once we've deployed that extension, if we go to our shoe card, there are a few different ways we can access that help. One way, sort of the traditional way that happened in the past, was through tooltips, clicking the Learn More property. In the past, this would have opened a new tab pointing to that URL that resolved for that field. What a lot of people, a lot of users, and perhaps even developers didn't know was if you had extensions on this page, you would just have to click around and click a bunch of Learn More links until you got the help that you wanted. That's not the way it works anymore, because now when we click Learn More, we actually open the help pane. And here we have a lot of great help provided in a great way for users to consume and understand. So starting at the very top, we can actually see the teaching tip that we added for this page. And we already have a way to just retake the tour from here. So if users don't discover that they can restart that from somewhere in the header for the page, they can find it from the help pane and retake that tour. We can also see that right under that, we have a Learn More link pointing to the same link that would have been there before. And what's great about this is that if we have multiple extensions on the page, we'll also be able to get more information about that. And these links are going to live side by side with Microsoft documentation content as well, if you're modifying any W1 pages or building on the baser system app. So, yeah.
Thanks, Cody. This was a really detailed summary of how taking a very not empty, but extension that has no guiding rails and really lifting that experience to the next level. And hopefully adding all of these steps and thinking through the process from setup to introduction of the pages and the help experience really will help to reduce the amount of time we need to spend on onboarding, training, and hopefully support as well when we release this to, well, theoretically release this to AppSource. Well, actually, I also would like to maybe build on top of this and fast forward a little bit. I think we can fast forward and assume that our shoe management extension is a big success. It has laid out the foundation for shoe management in the world. and others are building a strong foundation of our extension. And I would like to show how that would look like and how onboarding framework allows to seamlessly integrate onboarding experiences from IP from different ISVs. Cody, if we could switch to my computer. Cool. So I'm in Visual Studio Code. I start by taking a dependency on shoe management extension. One thing I do, as Cody also that just taught us, is I also define context sensitive help URL, because my documentation and help will live in a different place than shoe management currently does. One of the main purposes of my extension is to supplement the shoe management page, and I think one thing that it was missing was adding some style, because style is very important. So I extend shoe card page by adding a field for defining shoe style. I also make sure to add all the properties we just saw with about title, about text, to introduce that new field, because I also feel that it's a very important and will become very important part of this page. I also utilize links in my teaching tip. So I link to the shoe style list page, so users can explore what complete list of styles they can pick from. And also define the contextual sensitive help page specifically for this page. In this case, it links to BC Tech, because that's our favorite page. So I deploy the extension, and let's see how that looks in practice, how the experience changes. Of course, I need to refresh and jump to my environment. Shoe management extension is already installed. Shoe style extension has also been published. Well, actually, I see that I just noticed I'm in the wrong environment. There's onboarding 1. I should be onboarding 3. So that's something new we also added in this release. Quick plug. We also have now environment and company picker that allows to very quickly change environments without losing context. I can decide to jump to a new tab with my new settings, or I can change in place and just switch to environment and company. One click. Really nice. Okay, so let's go back to onboarding. Let's go to card. And I have taken this tour one more time. And now I can see that shoe size is highlighted, as Cody showed. But now also we see shoe style field also being called out in the tour. So onboarding framework makes sure that we made it a design choice that order of the fields not matter, and it's a very important design consideration that you have to take into account, because anyone can extend your page, and this is what is happening here. But since there's no assumptions, it just feels one naturally seamless flow. I also have a link to my shoe style list page. Got it. Now I saw what's new on this page, and I should be able to use effortlessly. At the same time, if I open help pane that Cody also just showed, we also see that about apps on this page, now we see two apps. So there is first app that is the owner of this page, and there is also styles that I contribute. I don't know, Cody, could you explain a bit more how that works behind the scenes?
Yeah. So for every app that modifies a page, we're able to show all of that help. Like I mentioned before, previously, let's say you added 2 separate fields to a page, and they were added to a couple different groups spread around the page. Users would only find that help if they knew that one field on the page was added by a different app than some other field, and that's just not something that users should need to care about. So now, no matter how many fields you add on a page, there's just going to be one link for you in the help pane that users can easily use to find. Also, with a little bit of information about what publisher and what extension it is, it'll let them know whether that is the help link that's going to help answer the questions they have.
Perfect. This is really seamless. So let's jump to a recap. I think we just built one shoe management extension. It has now a really nice seamless onboarding flow. We built on top of it. Still, the flow really makes sense, and users will be happy to be introduced to it. So recapping, Onboarding framework helps to turn customer onboarding into a repeatable process. It's a smart idea to start thinking about onboarding early, maybe even before writing a line of AL code, to really think through the experience and supporting processes and steps consultant will need to do, and consider translating that to code. Also, you have a broad set of tools in the onboarding framework to make that a reality. You can build and assemble a checklist. You can use assisted setup. You can add teaching tips to pages. And of course, the page synopsis, which is the main teaching tip for the page. And also, you can bring your help content to Alpane. And if you want to learn a bit more and just go at your own pace, we also have a really short link, AKMS BC Onboarding, that details this story, and you can follow along. Yeah, thank you all. That was it. We actually carved out a little bit of time, so we'll take questions first for our session, and then we can take questions as well for the session before. And we have 2 t-shirts, so best questions gets t-shirts. Okay, 1 t-shirt for you, and then 1 t-shirt for our session. Who has a question?
If there's none.
No? No t-shirts? Just ask something and you'll get a t-shirt. Here you go. We have 8 minutes.
Okay. Is there any way to have a rule for this? Like when you should add an about text or something, maybe for a promoted action or something that we should add a about text, or is there any guideline to it?
Yep. So if you go to that aka.ms/BC onboarding, there's a bit more guidance from our UX team that guides how we've chosen to use them within our Microsoft application. In general, you want to use them if there's something that's novel and important, specifically for making use of that page. It's not something that necessarily every page needs. We don't add it to every page, but there's a bit more of that textual guidance. But if you think it's very important, consider adding it, but probably don't add it to every page. And I think we outline it on there, but the rule of thumb that we go for is really no more than 3 fields or actions added to the page. Anything more than 3 to 5, users start to get very fatigued by going through all of the steps, and they're much more likely to exit them. So, great question.
Let's wait for one question, and otherwise you'll get a t-shirt. One more.
I mean, he was the first one, so he gets the t-shirt.
Okay. Decided. You get
He
the
broke
t-shirt.
the silence.
Oh, there you go.
Hi. Oh, I actually had a question to Just for the previous session. Is there any? So my understanding that this contribution to the base app would be only to the latest version, the cloud version. Do you guys consider a sort of a flow where people can contribute to the previous one, which would be on-premise?
That's definitely not part of this pilot, no. So it has its own set of challenges to backport features, because you might take dependencies on things that we don't have available in earlier versions. I mean, if there is a high demand for it, I'm open to these ideas. But I think to start with it will be the latest released version. So currently it would be the 20X version that you will be working on. Yeah.
But it's just a little bit of connection to this question. Yeah. But I mean, as the PR goes, would it potentially be possible that you guys will move this to a lower fix?
I mean, if you make a request and say like, hey, let's just say it's an extensibility request, and you really, really need that, let's say in version 19,
yep.
We can talk.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. Thanks. I mean, of course, it depends on the complexity. If this is going to be overly complex, then this just won't scale. But if it's something simple, absolutely, we can talk about that. Yes.
Cool.
Always happy to help.
Thanks.
There's someone right behind you with a question.
Thank you. So, I have again a question to Jesper and to your conversation. And the question is, regarding the ALAP extensions. in case we request a new event or like event extensibility, etc., we receive an answer like quite fast. That's great. But the question is about the feature requests and extensibility enhancement. Do you have some like rules for that? And in case customer needs something, for how long time should we wait to get a response from you for that?
So you mean the issues now and not pull requests?
The issues, like not about the new
Yeah,
repos.
so if it's event request, yeah, I mean, we try to process them as quickly as we can. The inflow varies a lot, right? So sometimes we get, hundreds within days, and sometimes we only get a few. So we don't really have any SLA, like there's no guaranteed time to fix. We've seen a few examples of extensibility enhancement requests, which were rather complex actually to implement, and as we need to implement them, that's our time. So then, those take a little longer to do. Some of them even took half a year or a year, I've seen. Normally with event requests, we try to turn them around rather quickly. So if it's a simple event and it's an event that is sound and makes sense to have it at that spot, you can expect that it's in the product within a month or two.
And regarding the feature requests, like the same approach? Just
if it's a feature request, then we need to see when it fits into our backlog. Again, some of these feature requests are actually rather large. We try to process as many of these ideas as we can. But since we need to do it, we're kind of the bottleneck here. But that's what we're trying to address with the open source story, right? So if it's really something that you need, now you will have a way to do it yourself. And that's going to put you on the fast track. So there we can make sure that things get turned around really quickly. So I would highly encourage you to, for going forward, do these things yourself. And then you will have them much, much faster than you have.
Okay, that's understandable. And the last question for that part, like previously we have a nav where we have a possibility to change everything in a standard code. For now we have a business central where we can only possibility to subscribe to something, but also we have like some pages which we can see inside the Visual Studio Code, like just sales header, for example. But other pages are securely hid, like with internal property, let's say, and it's impossible to see it directly, but it's still possible to find it at GitHub. Is like, in case we issued with some, we see some issues which is not working, in case we just copied that for our extension and use it as not an internal, is it a workaround or not? Or like, should we avoid that?
You should avoid that, yes.
Yep.
Absolutely,
Just
by all means.
That was a question to receive an answer and to give it to my customer. Yeah, thank you.
You can absolutely refer to me for that.
Thank you. With the contribution, previously there was where you had problems where you need to renumber all the if to make changes to some of the modules, you need to renumber them into the PTE range, and there was something with the license. Is that something that you are addressing? Maria
Yes,
didn't
we're
show
absolutely
this,
looking
but,
into that. So I've continuously worked on the Kronos license to turn it actually into a developer license that has open ranges. The only limitation you can say on the Kronos demo license these days is that you can only post in January through March. So that kind of makes it unusable for production. Other than that, the Kronos license should be a full developer license that you can use.
Okay.
We are going to start using ID Ninja, if you've heard of that one from Yeko.
Yeah.
And we're using that so that that you can find the next available ID and that we're not stepping on each other's toes with these IDs. So that is going to get rolled out as well. So then we hope that this is gonna fly nicely.
Excellent.
And
Thanks. Anyone?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, one more, maybe.
Oh, one more.
Wait with the clap.
Yes, so I heard some information that you guys have very extensive, a lot of testing coming on a base app.
Yes.
So there was some information that there is like more than 10 hours of machine
we're running
work
a lot of tests,
to
yes,
run
absolutely.
the base app test. So would this be part of this open source thing? So if I will fork it and I'm, for example, doing my commits to my branch, I would need to run the same big builds?
Usually you don't need to run the entire suite, but when you do when you check in the pull request, we're going to run the CI process, and that CI process is going to run the entire suite. We can be a little bit intelligent about like which tests we need to execute on, so we don't always run the full thing. If we see an area hasn't churned, we don't really run these tests, so we can be smart about that. But you're not going to get through unless our test suite passes, and that's the
It's
entire
more like
idea of this.
when I'm doing my commit, this is on my repo, it's on my own cost.
If you do it on yourself, then you need to run your test yourself. But of course, the entire test suite is available. I mean, and you of course encourage first to make a local run to see if your tests pass. Or maybe we can have an extra session on that. Proper
yeah,
test.
it would be interesting to actually see it, and then.
It's a good suggestion. I'll take that with me. All right, time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.